Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome to the Full Spectrum Project. I am your host, Brian Clune, and I am joined by my co-host.
Hi, this is Pete Haviland here in the sunny state of Texas.
And we are also joined by our Weird World News anchor, Angie Mole. Say hello, Angie.
Hey, y'all.
And we are joined today by somebody who really doesn't need much of an introduction, Troy Taylor. And Troy, I'm almost in awe having you on with the amount of knowledge you have on just about everything regarding the paranormal. And I mean, just you have to be one of the most prolific authors out there. So I just want to welcome you to the show and say thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, and please don't be in awe. please do not.
Well, you know, I mean, I have known about you for just so long, you know, and checked out your websites. I mean, literally for years, and you know, just to be able to have you on the show is just fantastic. And the subject tonight, I mentioned to you when we were off air, but I was joking with Pete earlier. We're going to be talking about the St. Louis exorcism case, and when I was going through the research for the show, I was like, okay, 2 hours is not going to be enough for this show. I mean, just there's so much involved with that. I mean, I thought I knew a little bit about it. But when I started doing research, I was like, oh, my Lord, there's just so much more.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I've been researching it for like 25 years. So, you know, you know, new things pop up all the time. Not as much as they used to, but because, well, basically everyone is dead. But it's no, I mean, really.
Yeah.
But I talked to everybody, you know, that was still alive over the last 20 years or so, and there just isn't anybody else left. In the last 5 years or so, there's only been one, and they're all gone now. So,
is Robbie still around?
No, he actually passed away fairly recently.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, and that's not, and I really haven't. This is the first time I've actually publicized that because it was kept very quiet. So, but yes,
well,
he did.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, you don't really need much of an introduction, but just in case there are people listening who don't really, you know who you are, can you just give us just a brief idea of how you got started and what got you interested in researching the St. Louis exorcism case?
Well, I have been involved in this field, community, whatever, since professionally, I guess you'd say, since I put my first book out since the early 90s. But it's really something I've been interested in my entire life. You know, I've always just had an interest in the strange and the unusual and the unexplained and ghosts and, you know, unsolved mysteries and you name it. Pretty much anything but UFOs. And a lot of, like, creatures, don't care. It's just not my thing, you know. But I just have an interest in all kinds of stuff, and I've always had an interest in it. So,
Well, there goes those Bigfoot questions we were going to ask.
yeah, that's I can't. I don't think I can help you with that.
I was going to bring up vampires. I mean, come on.
Well, I'd have actually more interest in that than I do Bigfoot, but not that much. But yeah, it's just you have to somewhere you have to limit yourself, as far as what you want to store in your brain attic.
Right.
So after a while, you get to the point where you got to throw some things out if you want to put anything new in there, especially when you get to be, I'm not going to say old, but older. How's that? So, but anyway, this is, it's just something I've always done. And I love history and I love writing. These are things that I've done, again, pretty much my whole life. And so, I've written a lot of books and on a wide variety of subjects, all, to do with either unsolved things, true crime, ghosts, hauntings, haunted history, that kind of stuff. And this is just the story of the St. Louis exorcism was something that always just appealed to me. From the first time I saw the movie The Exorcist, I guess, I probably was maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I've always been fascinated. And then when I found out that it was based on a true story, eventually I just sort of became obsessed with it. And lived across the river from St. Louis for quite a number of years. And during that time is when I really started to get interested in trying to track down the real story behind all this stuff. I mean, I have traveled, back and forth between St. Louis and Maryland, where the story started.
Cottageville, right?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Was it Cottageville in Maryland?
Cottage City.
Cottage City.
Yeah,
okay, Cottage City.
And so I've traveled back and forth quite a bit to, both areas. I've talked to a lot of people. I've done a lot of research. I've been to Milwaukee to talk to monks. I've been to Wisconsin to talk to retired priests. And like I said, I talked to everybody that was left to talk to that was still around. And unfortunately, most of them were pretty elderly at the time and they're just not around anymore. So all we have are their stories and their record. And that's the kind of stuff that I have spent my whole life trying to preserve, those old stories. And this is a case of a story that's still, because of the interest that's in it, it's not really an old story. I mean, it's certainly not a legend. I mean, there are a lot of myths and urban folklore that have grown up around this story, especially in St. Louis. A lot of people claiming things that aren't necessarily accurate, especially with some of the locations involved. And, it's one of those stories that people want to add their own fiction to, and it doesn't need it. It's a story that's, the truth is much better than the fiction that has come along in the story, both in St. Louis and in Maryland. And it's a compelling story, It's one of those stories where when you're finished with it, you don't know really what to think or what to believe. I've been doing dealing with this story for almost 25 years, and I can't give you an exact answer about what I think really happened. There are a lot of caveats with this story. I can say, well, I believe this, but, or I think this, but what I will tell you, just one phrase that I will use many times in trying to recount the story is that something happened.
Right.
Something did. Now, whether or not you want to believe it was an actual demon, out of the Bible, or you think it was some kind of paranormal occurrence, like some people did. If you think the whole thing's a hoax, that's actually harder to believe than some of the other explanations. But something happened that shook this family so badly that they were willing to move halfway across the country to try and find an answer for what was going on. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is compelling to me. That's something that has kind of propelled me forward on this story all these years and made me realize that there's definitely something to it.
Well, so in the real case, and you may know the real name of the boy who had been supposedly possessed.
Yeah.
But we'll just call him by his best known pseudonym, Robbie.
Yeah, that's what I do too. I stick with that for now. That may change at some point, but that was an agreement that I made with him many years ago that I wouldn't use it. Other people started using it. I started seeing it pop up on the internet, but I found it a long, long time ago, and it really, doing some actual research, it wasn't that hard to find. It was not a huge mystery, but out of the, trying to be respectful,
right.
I've used it. I've never used it.
Yeah, and I mean, believe me, I can completely understand that. It's one of the reasons why, like in my books, when I write about a home where I know people are living, I don't give addresses or anything like that because it just wouldn't be fair to the people living there. And I can understand.
They deserve their privacy. I mean,
right.
Even though it's something that's widely known. I mean, you don't want to be the creepy house on the corner,
Yeah, exactly. And Robbie deserved his privacy as well.
Yeah, and he went out. He went, and his family went a long way to make sure that he had his privacy.
Right.
And he did for the most part. I don't think that there were too many people that bothered him. Like I said, I have spoken with him, but we had an understanding ahead of time, and I never violated it during his lifetime, and as I promised I wouldn't. And I think that he deserved the privacy that he was given because the church had promised to never reveal his name, and they never did. The documents I have are all redacted. His name is taken out of them, last name, first name, everything. And I think that that's, something I wanted to stick with.
Yeah. And believe me, it's very understood. Now, I had read that it possibly may have all started when his favorite aunt, Tilly, at least that's the name they're giving, after she died. Apparently, his aunt was quite into occultism.
Spiritualist.
A spiritualist, occultism.
Oh boy, yeah, here we go. So
now,
let's dispel it as we go.
Yeah,
let's dispel it as we go. So,
because the events in this case actually began on January the 15th of 1949. That was when the family first reported strange occurrences in their home, scratching sound. How it started. Robbie's aunt, and we'll stick with Tilly. First, let me back up just a little bit and explain that his parents had met in St. Louis, and Robbie's dad worked for an electrical company in St. Louis. One of his friends that he worked with there, actually two friends, a brother and a father who worked there, and the brother married. Gets confusing, but the brother who worked there, the son, let's say the son who worked there, married Robbie's dad's sister, who is Tilly. Okay. All right. So I'm trying to make sure that's clear. But so the families were really tight. Eventually, Robbie's family moved to Maryland, and his dad stayed in the electrical business. But they did travel back and forth quite a bit because they all came from St. Louis, so all of their relatives were there. Eventually, Robbie's grandfather died, and so the grandmother came to Maryland to move in with the family. So that kind of puts you where things are, okay? Now, Tilly still lived in St. Louis. She did not travel because she had very high blood pressure and she was diabetic. So she didn't travel much, but they were still pretty close because they used to go and visit. However, all of these stories about Tilly being a spiritualist and none of that's true. None of that's true. She never gave him a Ouija board to use. That had nothing to do with this story. The Ouija board thing came in because of William Peter Blatty. When he wrote The Exorcist, his editor said, you got to have a reason why this started. Well, there is no reason. Well, there has to be a reason. So this being the early 70s, late 60s when he wrote this, Ouija boards by that time had gotten quite a stigma about them. So Captain Howdy and the Ouija board became a part of the book, and then, of course, the movie. Well, somewhere over time, people have mixed that into the true story, but it's not a part of it. Robbie was not using a Ouija board in his home. We don't know why this started. We don't know why. Whatever, if you believe that this is an actual entity, why it chose him, there is no explanation for this.
Well, you know,
other thing. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was gonna say I might have a little bit of insight into how the whole Ouija board came to be. How do you feel about the St. Louis University as far as their being truthful?
I've been hit and miss with them, so you know it's back and forth. Depends on who you talk to.
Now, I'm curious. What was their main? And I do have a reason for kind of bringing the university into it. What was their part in the whole affair?
Well, they'll have a fairly big part because Robbie's cousin, his older cousin, attended St. Louis University, and that's how, because of what was going on in the house after the family came to St. Louis, she went to talk to her advisor, who was Father Raymond Bishop, and he was a teacher of teachers, so to speak. She was studied to be a teacher. He was her advisor. He was a professor there, taught on the university staff. He came to the house, and after some experiences that he had, he spoke to his friend, who was sort of his mentor, which is Father William Bowdern. And the two of them became the exorcists in this case, even though neither one of them had any experience. But they had spoken to the head of the university, and he had sent them to see the Archbishop. So that's really their only role, other than, well, that is their only role because Father Bowdern was the pastor at St. Francis Xavier Church, which is on the SLU campus, but he was not affiliated with the university.
Okay. Now, now the reason that I brought up the university is when I was doing research for tonight's show, I was looking at the, I think you called it SLU. I was looking at their story about what happened, and they are the ones that were talking about the aunt being a spiritualist and the Ouija board. So it's the university itself that is actually putting that out.
Yeah, well, they that's not the thing about it is that anyone who was involved doesn't ever mention the Ouija board. It's not in the priest's diary. It's not in the family's account either. And the other thing is that the fact that Aunt Tilly got involved at all is because of Robbie's mother and grandmother. They believed that Aunt Tilly was haunting the house. The problem with that is that the events in the case began on January 15th. Aunt Tilly didn't die till January 26th. So it was another 11 days before she even died. And by then there had been a lot of activity, but I think there was some, I don't know, maybe animosity isn't the right word, but maybe just, looking for someone to blame. They blamed it on, blamed it all on Aunt Tilly.
Gotcha.
But I don't see how that would be possible considering that she was still alive when
everything started. Yeah.
Right.
So we need to take a quick station identification break. But when we come back, we will continue speaking with Troy Taylor about the St. Louis exorcist case.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
And welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB. If you haven't already joined the chat room, please go to WBHM-DB.com and click on the show banner. And if you have any questions that you would like to call in for our guest or your hosts, you can dial 205-533-7982. So we have been speaking with Troy Taylor about the St. Louis Exorcist case. That's the one that William Peter Blatty used as the basis for his book and subsequent, I always get that word wrong, movie. So I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of in regards to the book. You had kind of mentioned that William Peter Blatty had kind of brought in the whole possible Ouija board thing. I'm just curious, did he kind of base the Captain Howdy character? It was kind of a weird word for what was the demon, but did he kind of base that around Aunt Tilly and the Ouija board?
Well, not that I'm aware of, because I don't find any references to Aunt Tilly and Ouija boards until well after The Exorcist was published. I really honestly think that's just gotten confused over time. I mean, in the story, they use the Ouija board as kind of a doorway to the situation. But I mean, if you've seen the movie or you've read the book, you know that really has nothing to do with anything. That the demon is actually trying to reach Father Merrin. It has nothing to do with this little girl. She's just a tool that they used. And the name, they always, when Blatty wrote the book, he wanted to leave it somewhat vague, at least until later, as to what exactly was going on. And if you remember correctly, this little girl who had a very absentee father whose name was Howard. And that's, and then so Chris McNeil, her mother, is skeptical about her stories of Captain Howdy because she just assumed Howdy and Howard, that's awfully close. And, and that she just kind of thought, well, she's just making the whole thing up, and that's why she ends up at the hospital and all these things. But, a lot of the stuff that is happening in the movie, the basics are things that did happen in real life. Blatty was at Georgetown University around the time all this was happening. He read an article in the newspaper that a boy from, nearby, had been allegedly possessed and had gone to St. Louis for an exorcism. And he'd gone to his advisors and asked if there was any way that he could see the diary. And at the time, it was not widely available. There were only a handful of copies, and most of them were in the hands of people who weren't going to reveal them. And they turned him down and told him no. But over time, he spoke with Father Bowdern, and he spoke with other people and got enough of the story that he was able to create a fictional story, changing, of course, the boy to a girl, and making the whole thing take place in the DC area and that kind of thing. So he fictionalized the real story, but this is what inspired him. It was this actual story, the true story of what happened with this boy.
You had mentioned that Blatty had changed the character from a boy to a girl. My wife was kind of wondering whether he changed that due to the fact that girls seem to garner more sympathy than boys. Do you think that had anything to do with it, that he was trying to make a character that was more sympathetic to the reader?
Maybe. That would be accurate, I think. But I do know that he spoke with Father Bowdern, and I think he told him he was going to write this book. And, he was asked to please try to make sure to protect his identity. So he altered the character. But I agree with your wife. I think a girl definitely more sympathetic than a boy, in this situation for sure.
Well, in this story for a movie, I mean, it would be more dramatic with all the brutality happening on a girl than a boy. Not to say that it would be as I guess the word to say again is more dramatic, or for having that boy doing it. But you would feel bad. You would feel bad when it's happening to a little girl.
Right. Well,
and it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that the things that happen in the movie, while the real story does become both violent and a lot of strange things happen, nothing is over the top as what you see in the movie. And a lot of that is actually taken from another case, a woman who was possessed, or was said to be possessed, in Iowa in 1928. And the exorcism took place in a convent in Iowa, in Earling, Iowa. And
I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the really crazy pea soup kind of that kind of stuff. So he pulled from that too to kind of give it some more drama. Especially when they put the movie together, you really needed it to be visual. It couldn't be just it couldn't be just the character saying things. It had to be some real action going on. So he used some things from some other cases too to kind of add to the drama. So not that there's not plenty of weird things that happen in the real story, but it's still not quite as dramatic as the.
Right. I don't know whether it was.
I was going to say. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, you were talking about how he wanted to make it more dramatic, and I don't know whether you had ever gone to a Rocky Horror Picture Show, but you know how they throw rice and things like that, and do all this weird stuff. I remember as I was growing up that and I don't know whether this was just like a California thing, but I remember hearing things in the newspapers and on TV and radio of people actually taking pea soup into the theaters while they were watching the show and squirting people with it at the time that the character was upchucking.
Well, that's pretty fun.
Yeah. So I was going to say, it got a little bit more dramatic that way.
Well, I mean, when the movie came out, I mean, it was quite a sensation, and there really were, and it wasn't all publicity. There really were people fainting in the theaters, demanding their money back, running out of the theater screaming. I mean, it really was a movie that was unlike anything else that had really come out at the time. I mean, we were starting to see a big change in Hollywood in the late 60s and early 70s, but I don't think anything prepared people for anything quite like this. And I mean, there were churches picketing the theaters, telling people not to go, except for the Catholic Church. They wanted everyone to go because heroes of the story.
Right.
But Baptist churches and things were picketing. Billy Graham at one point said that actual evil was, impressed into the film itself.
Yeah, I remember something like that.
So, I mean, there was a lot of, it was, it really made an impression on people. And that's really the time when people really started to talk about the fact that, it was based on a true story. Just like now, when people go to the theater and they go see the Conjuring, they have no idea that the, Ed and Lorraine Warren, that those are comic book characters compared to the real thing. You don't want to mistake the real people for the characters in the movie. But all you have to do is put based on a true story on it, or a true story, or whatever, and it's going to sell more tickets. And so people, they leaked the fact that The Exorcist was based on a true story. People hadn't really talked about it that much.
Or don't forget the great one, inspired by true events.
Yeah. exactly.
That gives you carte blanche to write whatever you want
to do whatever you want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, my question was going to be, was the Annalise Michelle case around that time too? I can't remember the date.
It was actually later. Yeah, it was quite.
Was it later? Okay.
Yeah, I believe that was in the 90s.
Was that? Okay.
Yeah, and that's a real that's a head scratcher. That's a story that's really a mess.
Yes,
I think that had a lot less to do with possession than it did with mental illness. And I think so that she was tragically, mentally ill, and it wasn't understood by a very religious family. And, it turned into something that it never should have.
Well, she was on medication for.
Well, and went off the medication, and
then she went off the medication, and that's when she got worse.
Yeah. So, that was a mess. Thankfully, nothing like that ever happened in 1949, because initially there was no one even involved. I mean, the first person who was involved in this case outside the family was that if he was faking it, I'll get him out of the area, the situation he's in where he's comfortable and can be faking things, bring him to my house. Right. And if there is something going on, I can witness it myself. So he put Robbie in in the master bedroom, 2 twin beds, 1949, Lucy, Ricky, all that stuff. Right. So I have to explain that to people. That's when I talk about it. So they had 2 twin beds. Robbie laid down in one. The minister, Reverend Schultz, laid down in the other. And within a few minutes, the bed that Robbie was on started bouncing up and down and banging, one end lifting up off the floor, the other end banging against the wall. Well, he couldn't figure out how he was doing it. So he told him, why don't you go over across the room and, maybe you could sleep in the armchair over there. There's a big overstuffed chair and an ottoman on the other side of the room. So he sent Robbie over there. And within a couple of minutes, he'd fallen asleep and the chair started moving, like walking out away from the wall. In fact, at one point, it finally tipped over and dumped Robbie out onto the floor. Well, now he's starting to really think there might be some kind of poltergeist activity connected to this kid, a human agent kind of thing. So he tells him, let's make a pallet on the floor. So Robbie lays down on this pallet on the floor, goes to sleep. And Reverend Schultz is watching this. And as he's watching, he sees the pallet start to kind of shake. And then it starts sliding across the hardwood floor most of the way across the room. And right underneath the bed that Robbie had been sleeping on a little earlier. And at that point, is when he realized that it was, at least in his opinion, it was a poltergeist situation. It didn't have anything to do. I mean, no one's talking about anybody being possessed at this point. But there's a limited amount that he can do. I do know that he contacted J.B. Ryan at Duke University.
Yes, he did.
Case, and later he presented about the situation at a meeting in D.C., which a reporter who was at wrote about it, and that's how the story ended up in the newspaper about the exorcism. That was the first time it had ever appeared in any kind of newspaper, was after this meeting that Reverend Schultz had taken part in. And this was in August of 49, long after the events had already come to an end. But he wasn't there in St. Louis. He didn't know what happened after that. He only saw the first part of it, and I can certainly understand, why he would believe it was a poltergeist situation. That was a time period where there was starting to be a lot of interest in, PK abilities and ESP and that kind of thing.
Psychology and stuff.
Yeah. And so, that's what he was interested in. He saw what he wanted to see, and it all made sense. But then things got worse after that. And that's when Robbie, at least according to the testimony they gave the priests in St. Louis, that's when he began to be physically attacked by something. He was still having these epileptic-like seizures and screaming and yelling and barking and all kinds of things. But now he was starting to get cuts and scratches that appeared on his body, things that he couldn't have done. He couldn't have reached on his back. Underneath his pajamas, scratches were appearing. And of course, I think that you've probably have heard the famous, account that, his family started talking about trying to go to St. Louis where they had relatives, and that maybe they could get this activity to calm down if they did. And the word Lewis appeared on his stomach, which, that's something that Blatty lifted right out of real life with Reagan in the movie, but except in this case, it wasn't raised like that. It was scratched, bleeding cuts on his body that spelled out Lewis. And so they decided to give it a try, Now, before that happened, one of the biggest myths that I need to debunk about this story, and I still see it pops up all the time, is that the family decided that they would get in touch with, as things started to progress, they thought they would probably, would be in a good place to talk to the Catholic Church, because Robbie's father, that side of the family, his father's side of the family were all Catholics. Of Robbie's dad was not practicing at the time. He was a lapsed Catholic, didn't really put much effort into that at all. But the Catholics know about these kinds of things, so let's talk to them and see what happens. So they went to a church in Mount Rainier, which is very close to Cottage City. It's like the next town over. And they talked to Father Albert Hughes at St. James Church there. And the only advice he could offer them when he heard the story and, he didn't really know what to think. He gave them some prayer candles, told them to recite some prayers, and prayed with them there. And, really just kind of wished them luck. Later, when things started to go bananas in the house, one night, things were flying around without any help. And so Robbie's mother called Father Hughes again and asked him what she should do, because they had lit the candles that he had given them, and one of them had flown across the room. So he, prayed with her over the phone. That was the extent of Father Hughes's contact with Robbie and his family. Now, you might be wondering, wait a minute, that's not the story I've heard. It's not.
Troy,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can I cut you off just a minute? We have to take another station identification break.
Okay.
But I promise, as soon as we come back, you can continue with your story.
Sure,
So we hope everybody will join us on the other side of the break.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Birmingham, Alabama. If you haven't joined already...
I do believe that our producer was blowing kisses at us.
Well, she does that a lot, so, you know.
All right.
We're used to it.
I thought I was hearing things.
Anyway, if you haven't already joined the chat room, please go to WBHM-DB.com and click on our show banner, and that will take you to the chat room. And if you would like to call in with any questions for our guest or the hosts, you can call into area code 205-533-7982. So, Troy, when we left for the break, you were kind of talking about some of the myths regarding the Catholic priest, Howe, I believe you said his name was. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting that I had heard, and I thought it was a little bit unusual, was that the Lutheran minister actually had gone to the family and told them, you need to call in the Catholics. And then that at one point the Catholic priest had actually tried to do his own exorcism. And from what you were saying, none of that was factual.
Yeah, no. There's a great line that Reverend Schultz gets, the Lutheran. My favorite line that he's been given is, "You need to call the Catholics; they know about these things." Now, I'm 99.9% sure he never said that. He should have said it because it's a great line, but
Yeah.
I don't think he ever did, because he didn't really believe that it was anything other than something that a parapsychologist could help with. But they did end up going to a Catholic priest, however.
Well, going back to what you were saying about the Rhines and the letters are going back and forth, if I remember correctly, the Rhines were going to come down to try to do something, but they couldn't schedule. And they would by the time they could get there, that the exorcism had already been performed. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, because a lot of the information didn't come out until later. In fact, that wasn't until like August, and it was long over by then. They tried, but they did want to help, but I'm not sure that I don't think it's what they thought it was. I really don't. But on the other hand, I don't think at this point that things were quite as dramatic as people would like you to believe. Like I said, one of the big stories is that Father Hughes from the St. James Catholic Church in Mount Rainier did have contact with the family on a very limited basis. But he then is given credit for, while Robbie was in the hospital, as I mentioned earlier, he was sent to Georgetown Hospital to test him for, any kind of physical ailment that he might have, psychological ailment, anything. He was in the hospital, given a clean bill of health. But while he was there, the story goes, and this is where you get into the they said, kind of thing. Okay. The story goes is that Father Hughes just decided out of the blue to perform an exorcism on Robbie. Now, for one thing, you can't do. You just don't. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, they're not impromptu.
There's a lot of work. I was going to say paperwork. It's not so much paperwork, but there's a lot of logistics involved.
And a lot of permissions needed by the Catholic Church as well.
Well, and also also the priests too. They fast like for 3 days, 3 or 5 days.
There's all kinds
prayer.
of stuff. So this is dramatic effect. This is the drama that's added to the story. Well, Father Hughes comes to the hospital to perform the exorcism that he's supposed to have done. Robbie is raging like an animal and has been tied to the bed, which again, he was just there for a checkup, but whatever, let's go with it. He's tied down in the bed, but somehow during the exorcism, he gets a hand loose, reaches under the mattress, tears out a metal mattress spring, jumps up and slashes Father Hughes with it, cutting his arm so badly that, the story goes, the rest of his life, he was never able to lift that arm above his head or above his shoulders. And he was so traumatized by what had happened that he spent the next 6 months in a mental hospital and was never the same again. Now, that's the story. Now, let's leave out everything we know about the fact that you have to have numerous permissions and there are a whole bunch of rituals to do before you can perform an exorcism. Let's leave all that out, okay?
Okay. Let's
just go straight to the actual facts. Let's leave out all the, the religious stuff and go for the actual facts.
Okay.
At St. James Church in Mount Rainier, I was there about 5 years ago. The priest that was there that helped me, we went through the records from 1949 and looked to see what Father Hughes was doing around the time that he supposedly did this exorcism that traumatized him so badly that he was in a mental hospital. During that time, he performed something like 17 weddings, 8 baptisms. I've got it all written down, but I'm giving it to you off the top of my head. It's a lot. Several funerals. He was busy the entire time. He never at one point ever took time out to check into a mental hospital. He certainly didn't spend any time because he was so badly injured in a hospital or seeking treatment somewhere. This never happened. I mean, it's black and white, actual evidence. These things never happened. He was fine that entire time. This story got started years later, after Father Hughes passed away, I believe in the early 80s, if I remember correctly. And he had an assistant pastor at the time named Raymond Bober, I believe, who is the one who decided to create a legend for Father Hughes. For whatever reason, he started telling this story. Now, I don't know why. I can't begin to imagine why he would do this, but he did. He was the one who told the story and spread it around. I don't know if he was trying to just get in on the story. I mean, priests aren't perfect. You know, they're not perfect. They do dumb things too. I don't think he was trying to get in on the story. If he was seeking a little publicity for himself, maybe he was just trying to enhance the image of the Catholic Church. Who knows? Or just wanted to be part of the story. I really don't know. But he's the one who started that. And it got accepted by a lot of people as the truth. Because they didn't actually go back and look and see what was really going on. It's not that hard. It wasn't that hard. It was kind of like finding out the family's name back before the internet, which is what I did. It wasn't that hard to find this stuff out. But that's part of the story that just never happened. It's not, the story's weird enough. I don't know why people have to make things up to, enhance the legend behind it, but they do. By this time, the family was already on their way to St. Louis. So,
it makes for great dramatic effect. And, you've been around for so long. I mean, you know that when people get a bit or a taste of the dramatic, that they're loath to let go of it. So I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that it made such a great story that no one wanted to learn the truth of it.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, it's been repeated and repeated and repeated, only until fairly recently, and they finally stopped talking about it so much because there were a few people who were, like myself, complaining about the fact that never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. Because they actually start to pursue an exorcism in St. Louis, we're talking about a whole different animal here. I mean, there's criteria that has to be met. There's permissions that have to be asked for. I mean, there was...
you have to build your case.
You
got to build your case.
Exactly. And as we mentioned earlier, you asked me about the people at St. Louis University getting involved, and that was Father Bishop. And, he came to the house at the request of Robbie's cousin, because things didn't, obviously, spoiler alert, things didn't get any better in St. Louis. In fact, they got a lot worse. Right. And, things were really starting to happen, and the family was terrified. They were staying with Robbie's uncle.
Well, going back and looking at it, if thinking it might be RSPK, him being under the stress that he was, the move and how everything was going, if it was poltergeist activity, I could see how it could progress.
Right. It started to progress in ways that I think went beyond that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm positive it was a demon. I'm not. I still think that there were...
Well, there was definitely something.
Yeah, there was definitely something going on.
As you said earlier.
It was definitely getting worse. More things were happening. And, Father Bishop came out to the house by himself. He thought, if nothing else, he would go out, try to provide a little, ease the minds of the family. Because now they're starting to think it might be something diabolical, because they can't figure out a cure for it. They thought going to St. Louis would, as you were just saying, Pete, it would relieve some of that stress, if nothing else. Yeah. It didn't. It made things worse. And it shouldn't have, because he was in a place or surrounded by people that he really loved. Back in Maryland, his mother and his grandmother were pretty smothering. And I could see how those things could have gotten started with it being a PK thing. Because there had to be a lot of stress dealing with the two of them. He's an only child. He's got issues at school. I mean, I could see how it would happen, but you really would have, I mean, it was smart to try St. Louis thinking it might help, but it didn't.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it got worse. And so then now they really are talking to a priest, and he's coming to the house. Father Bishop comes to pray with the family and bless the house. And
you can't blame them for that. I mean,
no.
I applaud them for trying to look for everything that physically that they could check for. I mean, too many times these days, everybody just jumps on the bandwagon and it's preternatural.
It must be a demon. You know,
it must be a demon.
Watch too much TV. You know, and
yeah.
So yeah, but back then, now they're thinking it might be a demon. They don't have a TV show to watch.
No, of course not. Of course not.
You know, they, he comes to the house and then he witnesses things himself. He sees the bed moving with his own eyes, and when he splashes holy water on Robbie, it stops. Now that's when he starts to think that there might be something, sinister going on in this house and around this boy. And that's why he goes to see Father Bowdern, who was a friend of his. He was not part of the staff of the university. He was a pastor at St. Francis Xavier Church and a friend of Father Bishop's. And that's
was he Jesuit or?
Yes, they all are. Yeah, they all were in this whole story. They're all Jesuit. And so, Father Bowdern says, well, why don't I go back with you? Let's go out tomorrow evening. We'll see what's going on. And after they went back out together and witnessed more things and witnessed a bookshelf move across the room by itself, witnessed things flying around, Father Bowdern began to believe that there was something demonic going on in the house. That's when they went to see the president of the university to talk to him about what they should do. He got them an appointment with the archbishop, and they went to see the archbishop to talk to him about it. Now, they didn't go there asking for permission to do an exorcism. They went there to
Troy.
Got to stop.
Troy, got to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will be going into the Weird World News.
All right.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Troy, feel free to jump in when she.
Ladies and gentlemen, Angie Mole and the Weird World News.
And good evening, weirdos. How are y'all?
We're doing good, but who has the casino?
I'm sorry?
It sounded like a casino going, like all the coins were dropping.
Yeah, it did.
Anyway, hi, Angie.
Jackpot? Hi. Okay, so I picked one out specifically for Troy.
Run, Troy.
Actually, it's an insane coincidence, but, they happen, and I think it's great. So I guess I'll lead with that one.
Okay.
Oklahoma State Rep Justin Humphrey is calling for the state to declare a Bigfoot hunting season, complete with licenses. While the proposal is clearly a ploy to generate more tourism to the Ouachita Mountains, Humphrey says the licenses will be regulated by the Oklahoma Wildlife Conservation Commission, and he's already acknowledged that the licensing program can generate revenue, so he doesn't see a downside. I mean, how else are they going to fund the $25,000 prize they say will be awarded to the person who kills an Okie Bigfoot?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
There be squatch in them woods.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, now you got a whole bunch of drunk people out there looking for a Bigfoot.
They got a show about killing Bigfoot, but they had to change the name because people got so outraged. I think that's mean.
Oh, my Lord.
Yes, I remember that.
they got outraged over something that can't happen.
Yep.
Well, you don't know that it can't happen. But they don't want it to.
As Pete said, you can never shoot a Bigfoot because they're naturally blurry.
That's right. You can't get a good aim.
Yes.
Center mass. Aim for
Center mass. I was just fixing to say that.
There's already an annual Bigfoot festival in October in the area, so the representative is hoping that they can have the season coincide with the celebration. Now, we already know that Texas is awesome and it's so wonderful here. All I'm saying is you can hunt Bigfoot for free if you want to drive a little south of Oklahoma. But don't stay home. We're full.
Uh-huh.
I got no comment.
Texas is full. Okay, so online classes are the norm now for university students, but what do you do when you find out your professor is dead, yet you've also been watching him lecture since the beginning of the school year?
Break out more digital recorders for the EVPs so you can learn.
An art history professor is teaching from beyond the grave at Concordia University in Montreal. The professor died in 2019, but his video lectures were recorded prior to his death, obviously, and are still being used today. But
that's just creepy.
No one told the students. A student had a question and looked up the professor of records email, but instead found an announcement of the man's death. He immediately called the school, and he was informed that while his professor was technically dead, there was a live professor and 2 TAs taking care of business.
So how do you know for sure that he recorded those before his death?
Well, because I am sure that they're just continuing to use the same material over and over again. And I kind of have a problem with the whole thing. It seems shady and dishonest. And the student's basically paying for the privilege of being lied to, because, the article I read was talking about how this person had, a lot of clout in the art history world or whatever. So that person, all of his students were taking that class under the assumption that that was their actual professor. And
yeah, but he's an academic, and they do the same thing every single year. This could have gone on forever. No one would have ever have known. This guy's probably had tenure since like 1974, and so they couldn't get rid of him anyway, so they just kept right on running him. I'm not surprised by this at all.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a residual haunting, Troy. How would you like to keep coming back and doing the same stuff? I mean, you talk about a ghostly version of Groundhog's Day.
Well, yeah, but if it was my job, I wouldn't care.
Well, here's the thing. Apparently, he still has tenure.
Well, yeah, there you go. So, I mean, his family's prize estate is probably still being paid for the use of the classes. I'm not joking.
Well, sure.
I bet they are. So.
I mean, it's so frustrating to think. And, I was a public school teacher and I was involved in our textbook adoption. And as a college student, I obviously could not get, I'm in the science field, so I couldn't just get a science book from 2 years ago used because they changed one page and required an entire new edition.
Well, science changes, art history does not.
Exactly. I understand that. But what I'm saying is the whole system in every possible facet of, it doesn't matter if it's a BA or a BS, it's all BS.
I was going to say, it sounds like BS to me.
Yes.
Did they get a parapsychological addendum to that diploma, though?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's your minor. That would be your minor.
So the mayor of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, made headlines recently when he followed the advice of a meme that's been circulating a while and put in a call to Chick-fil-A to see if they would assist the city with their drive-through COVID testing sites.
What?
Wait, what?
If you have seen the meme online, basically it's people saying, well, if Chick-fil-A was in charge of all this COVID testing, the stuff would get knocked out, and the vaccinations and everything. that it wouldn't be a problem?
They obviously haven't seen the long lines at Chick-fil-A.
Well, I'm okay. I
But they
understand
move.
that because even here, we get lines that are, out the parking lot onto the main street, and it's kind of a hazard, but they move fast. And that's kind of the point was the mayor called the local Chick-fil-A store manager, and the manager got the line times down from over an hour to about 15 minutes.
Wow.
I could believe that. But you can't get tested on Sunday, which is the day you're really going to want it.
Exactly.
Because that's the only time you really want Chick-fil-A.
Well,
I agree.
Here's another problem. And I don't know how you guys feel about Chick-fil-A, but I don't find them all that great. So it kind of makes me wonder if the Chick-fil-A isn't that good, how are the vaccines? Never mind.
Well,
here's the thing about Chick-fil-A, because you like In-N-Out also. So your opinion automatically is nullified.
Oh, I am not a big In-N-Out fan at all. And
well,
they
I don't
have
like
even
there either. Not when Whataburger is so much better.
Oh,
So.
yes, it is.
Yes, it
oh,
is.
My Lord. Whataburger is the best.
Yeah, it's so much better. But in Washington, in Seattle, they've actually the governor there has actually contacted Starbucks, and they're actually putting together their vaccine program for them because they understand how to make big masses of people move. That's true story. So it's not even like a meme.
Yeah, but they can't get their names right.
They're really doing it. So, but they won't get.
Yeah, but they can't get their name. They can't get their names right. I mean,
no one's name will be correct, but still, at least they'll get through the line. So.
No H.
Yeah.
And here's an advantage of the Starbucks too. If they put a little bit of espresso in there, they'll run it right through.
That's right.
So perfect solution.
Well, luckily, it was only the manager who.
Yeah. So you're trying to tell me it would be a shot and an extra shot?
Yes, it would.
Right.
A shot with a shot.
Or 3 extra.
A shot with a shot.
In my case.
Oh man.
So it was only the manager who attended to the lines at the testing site. No employees or cows were needed to help out. So.
Yeah.
Well, I did kind of wonder, did they bring over everybody, or because that seemed like that would be a little, not really ethical. But no, it was just the manager of the store.
Well, you know why they didn't bring the animals in, because they were afraid everybody would be too cowed to go in there.
Oh God, Angie,
sorry.
where's the stick? Troy, I'm sorry. He's starting early.
Whatever, man. Cat's the one with the mute button.
Don't do it, Cat. Don't do it.
I only use it on me.
If you haven't seen it already, Kraft is releasing 1,000 boxes of mac and cheese to lucky winners, but there's one interesting twist. The powder in the box will turn the macaroni and sauce bright pink, and it's supposed to taste like candy.
Ew.
You can sign up for the contest online. It ends on February 8th, so you'll receive your box in time for Valentine's Day. There's no information on whether the flavor is only candy or if it's supposed to be like cheesy candy. But either way, if you really love the person you're with and you happen to win the contest, show them how much you care.
Wait a second.
The box
Have you ever had cheesy candy?
No.
I didn't think it was possible.
I don't know, but I mean, this is like fuchsia macaroni and cheese. I didn't think that was possible either. I just want to know if there was some way that they could have stamped in call me or hug me, on the macaroni like they do conversation hearts. That would have been impressive.
How bored have we gotten down here on Earth? I don't want to be here anymore.
I don't know, but now I'm thinking about making the Kraft macaroni and cheese, the thick and creamy, and melting some Starburst and pouring it in there to see how it would go.
Film it. Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah.
Pixar, it didn't happen.
So Yeah.
To our listeners, if you're going to do that, please forward them over to Brian Clue. I don't want to see this.
Oh no, you'll see it. If he gets it, you will see it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes, you will.
He will call a meeting and make sure that he shows it, every one of them to us.
And it'll be filmed in high def.
Yes, it will. I am so scared. I am so scared.
At least you won't be able to smell it or taste it, so there's that.
No, he will make a way for it to happen. Trust me.
I would maybe.
Well, y'all, that is all I got for y'all tonight. Thank you so much for listening to the Full Spectrum Project's Weird World News on WBHM-DB, Birmingham, Alabama. So with that, let's get back to Brian, Pete, and Troy.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
You know, we're talking about the candy. A few days ago, I had a buddy of mine. He's got a 4-year-old, and
here it comes.
The kid actually swallowed 25 plastic toy horses, if you can believe it. All right, it's all right. I mean, he's still in the hospital, but the doctors say his condition is stable, so it's okay.
Do you look this stuff up while we wait?
That's the worst one yet.
Well, here's what's really bad.
Jesus.
He said once he recovers that his voice would just be a little hoarse. So that's not bad. He does.
He does listen to me while I'm giving the news. He's not listening to me. He's looking up bad jokes.
Actually, he was kind of upset about how much money he was going to have to pony up for the bill, which was well. Come on, man! He said it was going to be hard.
I give.
And look,
no more.
At his wage, he said it was going to be hard to be saddled with a bill that big.
Can we just go back and talk about The Exorcist?
I don't think good enough for this.
Okay, all right, fine. I'll rein in the jokes. Jeez, you guys! I don't know what you're talking about. My Lord. Okay, so we've been talking with Troy Taylor about the St. Louis.
Did you realize that Troy probably won't come on again because of your joke?
I'm actually surprised he didn't hang up. So,
was that live? I thought.
That was live. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, Pete, you never should have told him that. Now he is going to hang up. Jeez. So we were kind of talking a little bit when we went to the break in the news about them going to St. Louis. Now, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. You
Sure.
said something about some words that had appeared on Robbie's skin, and I guess it was in various places.
Yeah, it was Lewis. You had mentioned Lewis on his stomach, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were some other markings too, but the only actual words that appeared that they could make out. And again, we're basing this on testimony given by Robbie's mother. So I'm not going to say it didn't happen. I just want you to take it with a grain of salt. At least the stuff that happens in St. Louis was transcribed in the diary by the priests, by Father Bishop. He all the earlier stuff he took from Robbie's mother, and then he wrote that up for the diary. I mean, the diary.
So they weren't witnesses to it. This was just testimony.
Yeah, not the stuff in Maryland. Right, not the stuff in Maryland.
Okay.
Well, what I'm curious about, when the word Louis appeared, they took that to mean go to St. Louis?
Right, because they'd been talking about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here's my question, especially as a father. If I'm thinking that there's something weird like this going on with my child, and all of a sudden words appear telling me to take him somewhere, I'm not sure I would actually do that. That just seems kind of odd to me that.
Well, I mean, the way they saw it is that it was confirmation of the feeling that they had that they should go to St. Louis. They didn't take it as being anything diabolical in that case. I think they saw it kind of the opposite, that it was someone trying to help them. Now, I don't think that if things had been progressed a little further into the story, into the case, I don't think they would have interpreted it that way. But this is still early on. You know, they're frightened by the things that are happening. And since they suggested going to St. Louis, they saw that as, yeah, hey, you should go. And maybe things will get better. I mean, that's the sole reason they went, you know, to St. Louis, is they could be around family. They didn't have any other family in Maryland. So going to St. Louis, where everyone was, all the relatives were, that seemed like a good plan. So they ended up in the uncle's house in Belnor, which is a suburb just kind of north of St. Louis, just a little north.
Now, you had said that Robbie's cousin is the one that finally, I guess, went to St. Louis University and contacted a priest. Now, was that because he had seen strange things going on in the house?
No, she knew him personally because he was her advisor. And so she didn't know who else to talk to. And she thought that maybe he could point her in the right direction. And being a nice guy, which he was, he offered to come and see for himself, and thought maybe he could help, because he wasn't, again, I don't think he came here. Nobody's thinking possession at this point. That's not until they see things for themselves. And then once he saw things, then he contacted his mentor, who was Father Bowdern, and they went back together. And then it was Father Bowdern who, while not an experienced exorcist or anything, had been around for quite a while. He'd been a chaplain during World War II, so he'd seen some things, as we often say. So this was a guy who'd been around a lot, and this was it, and it frightened him. That's why they went to see. Well, they got an appointment with the head of the university, who then got them an appointment with the archbishop, and that's when that's where we left off, is that they're in his office and they're explaining to him what they've seen, and they're recommending that someone with experience might want to look deeper into this case. And the archbishop then says, no, we're going to perform an exorcism, and you two guys are going to do it. Now, there's a reason for that has nothing to do with church doctrine or experience or anything else. The first thing you have to know is that priests who perform exorcisms normally are highly trained. This is something that they study for years to be able to do. And there's criteria that has to be met for an exorcism. But for whatever reason, the permission was granted, even though they hadn't asked to do it themselves. But the reason why this moved forward the way it did with these two guys, who then, of course, had to do like a crash course in how to do exorcisms. I'm not joking either. And that's the reason they put the diary together as a how-to guide, because they started looking for material. Yeah.
Troy, I'm sorry. Yes. We do have to take another quick break, but we will come back in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on.
I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experienced here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB. If you haven't joined already, please go to WBHM-DB.com, click on our show banner, and that'll take you to our chat room. And if you have any questions for our guests or the host, you can call into area code 205-533-7982. And Troy, when we left for the break, you were talking about the kind of the crash course that the priests had to take before doing the exorcism.
Right. Well, you know, there was no real current information. I mean, what they were finding about exorcisms in 1949 was most of it written in the Middle Ages. So, you know, or they were finding some recent stuff, some of it in German, and, you know, but there wasn't really anything that was handy to use. So they, that was the reason that they put together that diary, is to kind of be a how-to guide for future exorcists. Well, but to back up about this whole thing, these two guys, neither one of them wanted this job, because the first thing they found out about being an exorcist was how dangerous it was and how it could, you know, destroy your health, your sanity. You know, I mean, things could happen to you. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't have any experience, but there was a reason why they were chosen, is because they wanted to keep the circle on this thing as small as possible. I mean, there would be other people involved in the situation, about 40 total. Some named, some not, but there would be about 40 people eventually who would know what was going on with this. But they didn't want this story to leak out to the newspapers. Just to put it in a real short paragraph, the church in St. Louis in 1949 was, at that time, desegregating all of their churches and schools. And this was not going over well at all. People were really angry, upset. You got to remember, 1949, there's still separate colored and white water fountains. You know, they didn't want the churches to be desegregated. They wanted them separate. And the church just decided, hey, no, we're doing this. Well, it was a lot of publicity they were getting. And the last thing that the Archbishop wanted was for word to leak out that the church was in the middle of performing an exorcism on a young kid. This wasn't now. This was 1949. People were not going around doing exorcisms in this country. And they didn't want it leaking out that there was one going on in St. Louis. So they picked the two guys who were probably least qualified to do it and put them in charge. But, you know, they rose to the task with help but they still rose to the task and spent the next week or so trying to find out everything they could about exorcisms, fasting, praying, doing everything that they were supposed to be doing to get ready for this before the rituals actually began. One of the things they did was to recruit some help. Not only did they have Robbie's father and his uncle to help out, because they knew that, with everything they were reading, that exorcisms could be very violent, and that the person who was possessed, could become very violent, as Robbie would do. And they recruited a young guy, or younger than they were anyway, whose name was Walter Halloran, who was studying to be a Jesuit priest. Walter Halloran was in his 12th year of study, so it's not like he, just graduated high school or anything. But he was a big guy. He played football. He was a boxer. He was going to be handy in helping. He was a good friend of Father Bowdern's. I believe Father Bowdern had been his principal when he was in high school, and they had become friends and had remained friends as he was studying the priesthood. So he would come out each night to help with the exorcism rituals. But this whole thing had to be kept secret, which meant that Father Bishop, who taught at St. Louis University, had to keep up with his duties. He had to teach every day. He had to keep office hours. He had to do everything he normally did. And then at night would come to the house in Belnor. They would start the exorcism rituals at about 10 o'clock, and it might last till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning every night. Father Bowdern still had to take care of his church. Walter Halloran still had to attend all his classes and all of his duties, and they couldn't tell anybody why they were so tired for the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
Well, this went on, during this time, Father Bowdern lost about 40 pounds from between the stress and the exhaustion and the fasting that he was doing as the lead exorcist in this case. And this was going on every night. They would come to Belnor. Robbie would slip into these trances, and he would just go crazy. They'd have to try to hold him down. They would try to pin him to the bed. He, wouldn't stay in one place. Father Halloran eventually became a priest too. When I knew him, he was retired, but he became a priest later on. He would talk about having to hold Robbie down. There were things that he could do. Well, for one thing, he'd urinate everywhere. He would pass this just incredibly awful gas. They'd have to throw open all the windows, and he could spit with his eyes closed. It was never, and we're not talking about just like spitting. We're talking about.
Sounds like Pete.
Yeah. Just this big goop of, just never ending, kind of goop that was coming out of his mouth, but he could spit it with such accuracy that Father Halloran told me that he could spit 8 and 10 feet away and hit somebody in the face with his mouth closed. There were, and so, one of the things I always asked Father Halloran when I did a series of interviews with him before he passed away, I'd ask him, do you really think that Robbie was possessed? And he'd say, well, it's not my area of study. I don't feel like I'm qualified to say one way or the other. Father Bowdern always believed he was genuinely possessed. And I'd say, well, what do you think? And he'd say, well, I just don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you. But there was this one time, and that's what he'd always say, and he told me about times when this skinny 13-year-old boy who probably weighed 100 pounds soaking wet was able to throw off 4 and 5 men trying to hold him down later on. Once he punched Father Halloran in the face so badly he broke his nose. And then he told me, I said, do you really think he was possessed? I don't know, but there was this one time, and told me about seeing the bed levitate about 8 inches off the floor. Now, that's hard to know exactly what to think about some of these things. You can be a believer, you don't have to be a believer, but, here are the facts according to the people who were there. Eventually, things got so bad at the house, the uncle's house in Belnor, that they moved him first to the rectory of the St. Francis Xavier Church, but things didn't go any better there. And eventually he was becoming so violent, and I'm trying to move this story along. We're going to run out of time. I'm sorry. I don't want to.
No, that's fine.
But they eventually moved him to the Alexian Brothers Hospital. It was a hospital in South St. Louis run by a group of monks, the Alexian Brothers, and they were sworn to secrecy. They were a group who treated alcoholism, and a lot of the people they treated were priests who had drinking problems, and they were the ones who had to decide when they went back to work. But they would never tell. They would never talk about who they were treating. So Father Bowdern knew that taking Robbie there would be good. They also treated a lot of mental health disorders. So they had a secure wing at the hospital where he could be taken. And they took him there for the last about 4.5 weeks of the exorcism was spent at that hospital with him restrained on a bed at night. During the day, though, and that's the thing, and we didn't really talk about this, but during the day, Robbie would be absolutely fine. He would read comic books, he'd play baseball, he would play board games, and then at night, a whole other side of him would come across. And at the hospital, he had all these monks who were there who were treating him or helping, at least trying to help take care of him during the day. They'd entertain him, they'd keep him busy. They take him outside. He was taking catechism classes because they believed if he converted to Catholicism, that maybe that would help with the exorcism. But he was becoming so violent that they were afraid of what to. I mean, at one point he attacked a group of monks, and I mean, these were not like, little, kind of soft-spoken, little men. I mean, these were young guys and big guys, a lot of them. And, here's a 9,500-pound kid who's able to take on 3 or 4 guys at a time. There were instances, too, that I found out about later. When I initially wrote my first edition of the book about this, that was in like 2005. That was shortly after I had done my interviews with Father Halloran before he passed away. I didn't know at the time that I thought he was the last one, and I didn't know that I would be still doing more interviews and more interviews and more interviews. But a few years ago, I had probably one of the best interviews that I ever conducted with an Alexian monk who was retired, was living in a retirement home. He was in his late 80s. He had cancer, and he was dying, and he wanted to tell his story about what he had seen at the Alexian Brothers Hospital back in 1949. And I was contacted. I went to visit him in Milwaukee and conducted interviews with him. And his stories were not like Father Halloran's. Father Halloran's stories were, about, all the violence and holding him down and things like that. But Brother Greg was telling me about things that he saw, like an instance when Robbie grabbed a hold of a Bible, and when he did, he grabbed it out of Father Bowdern's hat, and when he did, the entire Bible just fell apart. The glue just disappeared from the pages, and it just fell into a pile of paper. He grabbed a hold of Father Bowdern's stole that he had around his neck, and according to Brother Greg, the threads fell apart. They just showered into pieces. He had gone into the room one day carrying some towels, and a pitcher had flown across the room, a glass pitcher, narrowly missed his head. But that wasn't the story that he told me that really kind of gave me the chills, because he was very sincere. I mean, this is a guy who'd spent his entire life in service to other people, and he had no reason to lie or to make up stories. There just was no reason for it. And he said that one day during one of the exorcism rituals in the evening, he was there helping to hold Robbie down onto the bed, as they often had to do. And he said that while he was there holding Robbie by the ankles, that he levitated about a foot off the bed.
Wow.
And he couldn't explain it. I mean, he had no explanation for it. And I asked him the same way I did Father Halloran, do you believe that Robbie was really possessed? Well, to Brother Greg, there was no denying it. He absolutely just turned to me and said, anybody who could say that, who was there and could say that, is wrong. They're confused. There's no way you could mistake it. This boy was possessed. There was evil in that room. And he was convinced, he was absolutely sure about it, that it had happened. So
yeah, I wouldn't know how to go about explaining something like that.
No, I wouldn't either. And it was a case of where, I had always, and I still have, there are lots of elements to the story, and some of them I'm still in, some of the criteria, how some decisions were, a lot of things I question, but here was a guy who was telling me what he saw. I wasn't there. He was there. He was literally there in the room, holding on to this boy's feet, and saw what happened. And he was dead serious about what he'd seen. And that's something that you just, how do you shake that? I left that interview with him. When I finished my interviews, I left that interview thinking, man, have I been wrong about this all this time? Was this absolutely genuine all along? I still don't know. I really don't know. I like to just present the evidence that I have and let people decide for themselves.
When you were doing your research on this, and you had gone and you went to where the monks were, did you have an opportunity to go to the room that he was in?
No, the Alexian Brothers Hospital. There is a hospital there now, but it's a new one. It was built in the late 70s. So the old hospital is gone. When I went to visit the monk, it was actually at a retirement home for Alexian in Wisconsin. So it wasn't, he wasn't still there, and the old hospital by then was gone. Now, I've interviewed a lot of people who worked in the old hospital after it, stopped being staffed completely by monks. That's how most Catholic hospitals are now. There will still be like some nuns or something still on staff, but you know, in the past, all the nurses were nuns, or in that case, were monks, and it's not like that anymore. But so I talked to people who were there after the monks were there, and there's lots of stories, and I just sort of listen to all the stories. I jot them all down. I just compile the stories and let people decide what they think, because once you get away from an event like that for 25 or 30 years, you get a lot of mythology that gets mixed in.
Yeah, and then you have the urban legend starting too.
Right, and people believe that, because they've heard that, well, that room down that hallway, that's where the exorcism took place. Well, now, there are weird sounds, or every time I walk by the door, it seems really cold. And, there's lots of those stories, and you could see why, maybe, I'm not going to say they didn't happen, because these people swore to me they did. They're real people telling what they believe are real stories. So I have to let people decide for themselves. But when it comes to stuff that I know is absolutely just an urban legend, I'm going to call that out. People's experiences, you can't dispute people's experiences, because you weren't there. You didn't experience it, they did. So that kind of stuff I have to let people decide.
Now, Troy, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and it goes to what you were saying, that there's a lot of myths out there.
Yeah.
And TV history, and I use the term history in relation to TV kind of with a grain of salt as well.
Right.
A few years ago, I saw a supposed documentary about this case, and they were talking about how Father Bowdren was tormented and torn because of the things that happened during his tenure during World War II, and that he was, thinking about leaving the priesthood and all of this. Is any of that based in reality?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd never heard at any time that Father Bowdren ever thought about leaving the priesthood. And I'm not sure when that would have been. He, I said he served as a chaplain during the war, but other than that, he was a principal at a Catholic school. He was the pastor at a very busy, very large, very busy church. I've never heard anything about that. I mean, he remained a priest for the rest of his life. He remained active in the service, and a lot of people, spoke to him. He wrote some letters and things to people that he always wished. He regretted the fact that he couldn't talk about this case, but he was told not to. When it was all over, the Archbishop decided that no one should talk about this because he felt it was counterproductive. And Father Bowder wanted to talk about it because he wanted people to know that there was evil in the world. And as far as I know, that's his only regret with this case, is that. I've never heard that he planned to leave the priesthood. I've talked to some of his relatives, and they've never mentioned anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's part of the whole, you can't really trust what you see or hear on TV anymore, especially in regards to history.
Yeah.
And I think what they were probably doing is probably trying to throw that in because they basically tried to tie him in with Father Karras from the movie. And I think they were just trying to fool people or something.
Right.
And now, Troy, I think I remember reading somewhere that before they tore down the old hospital, that they had gone into the room which had been sealed and removed. I'm thinking it was like the furniture that was in there, and placed it somewhere. And,
you know what? I will tell you that story when we come back, because we need to take a quick break. And then when we do, I'll tell you what happened in that story.
Troy, you're hired.
I've been watching the clock this time, man.
You are hired. All right, so we'll continue talking with Troy Taylor as soon as we come back from the break.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Project on WBHM-DB out of Birmingham, Alabama. If you haven't already joined the chat room, there's still a little bit of time in the show. So if you'd like to, go to WBHM-DB.com and click on the show banner. And if you would like to call in with questions for our guest or the hosts, you can call into area code 205-533-7982. So, Troy, we kind of cut you off when you were about to answer Pete's question. So please.
Yeah, well, Pete had asked, and he had a good question because that the locked room that we were discussing does tie into the story, and it sounds like an urban legend. It sounds like it's going to be something to, Indiana Jones or something, but it really happened when they were tearing down the hospital. That room, Brother Cornelius, the Alexian who was in charge of the hospital, had sealed that room off after the exorcism, and when they were tearing it down, some of the workmen were going through the hospital and they were removing things from the building, anything that could be salvaged. And they broke into that locked room and found there was still furniture in it. There was a desk, and the drawer in the desk had Brother Cornelius's copy of the Exorcist diary a copy of which Father Bishop had given him, and he had sealed it in that room. And that's actually how it leaked out. That's why we have copies of it now. This was in the late 70s, and it was given to the guy who was running the construction company. He left it on his desk. His daughter looked at it, recognized the name of Walter Halloran in it, and it was an uncle of a friend of hers, and the rest is history. I mean, that's how we found the diary, or at least how it was released into the wild, so to speak. But Pete asked about the furniture, and yeah, that's where we get into the realm of some really good St. Louis urban legends as to what happened to the furniture. There were stories about how it was taken to a hospital, a nursing home, and put in the attic. I actually had a guy who told me a story about being a mover, worked for a moving company and was taken to a rectory in St. Louis, and they were told to remove some furniture that was in a room in the basement of the rectory and to take it to a storage unit, but not to open the case that the wooden crate that the furniture was in, because that was the furniture from the room where the Exorcist happened. And I always like to joke that it's probably in a storage unit next to the Ark of the Covenant somewhere.
Yeah.
But, it's another one of those stories that it's a great story. It's probably not true, but I wish it was. It's kind of like Reverend Schultz's line about, hey, call the Catholics. They know about these things. I know he never said it, but I wished he would have, and I think that probably falls into that camp.
Well, Troy, I wanted to ask you this about Robbie. Now, one of the last things that I remember that I can't remember where I heard it from. It was probably, I can't remember. But he said after the exorcism, he said that he had seen St. Michael fighting a demon and everything was okay after that. What was Robbie's thoughts about what was going on throughout this?
That's the problem. According to Robbie, when it was all over, memories of the things that happened faded really fast. When he was interviewed years and years later, when I interviewed him, he said that everything that happened, he felt like it was someone else's memories, because he couldn't remember the specific events himself. He only remembered what people told him happened. So it never felt like real life to him. He just didn't remember. So he couldn't tell anybody what he was thinking at the time, because he just didn't know. He didn't remember any of it. So, I mean, that was always his story. That's what he always stuck with, and he never changed that story. I don't know if it was true or not, but he certainly did not want to talk about it. I mean, when it was all over, he went home. But I will tell you that his life changed dramatically after that. He converted to Catholicism. He finished his middle school, finished high school, went on to college, and became a literal rocket scientist. No kidding.
Awesome.
Wow.
He actually holds a patent on stuff used for the space shuttle. So, I mean, he really went on to have a full life. He was married, had kids, really kind of got things together. There are lots of things that you can wonder about based on things that happened as a kid. Was he ADHD? Was he on the spectrum somewhere? A lot of those things seem a possibility, but we don't really know. We don't know a lot about his private life, and what we do know, well, we're just not really talking about. And, as far as what happened with this particular case, he always said that he felt like it was someone else's memories. So it kind of leaves it hanging, I mean, and really that's what the story boils down to. And as I mentioned earlier, when I try to present this, I present the things that I know, the facts that I know. I try not to put my impressions on it too much, because I would rather people decide for themselves what they want to believe. I think it's a matter of your personal choice, what you believe in when it comes to demons and angels and religion and God and all of those kinds of things. And you can either believe he was possessed, or you can come up with a lot of other suggestions. But, I do try to break that down in the book. I broke it down to say, here are the things that people think happened, or what it could have been. But here's a problem. Here's the pros and cons to all of these ideas. And I just want people to decide for themselves. And that's the way I've always tried to present it. I should mention that we were talking about TV, and next Friday, February 5th, on Discovery Plus, which is Discovery's new streaming service. It's like the $5 service they just added. There's a brand new shock documentary done by the same company that did the one on the Warrens, where they kind of went, okay. If you watch that one, but it's the same company. But it is about this case, and I worked with them pretty extensively. I'll be doing a lot of publicity for them next week. But if you get a chance to see it, watch it. I'm sure at some point it'll probably be on the Travel Channel too. It was supposed to be on back in the fall, but they decided to hold it for the streaming service because they thought it was good enough to make it a perk. So that seems like, to me, that seemed like a good thing. So
nice.
Anyway. Hopefully it'll be great.
Congratulations.
But, yeah, that's the only thing I'm plugging right now.
No worries.
So yeah, and I wrote a book about this. If you really want the whole story, it's called "The Devil Came to St. Louis." So yeah. Anyway,
now,
but yeah,
Troy, I was curious. So did you read Bishop's diary?
Yeah, I've got a copy of it. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask.
I got one too.
And it goes back to what Pete was saying. Supposedly in that diary is what Pete was talking about, as far as I guess, the Exorcist lasted for, I think you said, about 6 weeks, and the last day, supposedly April 18th of 1949, Bowdern had, I guess, forced the entity to reveal its name, which really didn't, cause the demon to, or what the entity to leave. And I'm just wondering whether any of this was, actually in the diary, that Robbie had, or the entity had said, he has to say one word, one big word, and I am in him. He will never say it. Do you know what that word was? And then
it was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, that's okay. I just kind of want to get the whole question in. And then later on, just before midnight, is when I guess the demon left. And when Robbie woke up, he said he had a dream of Saint Michael battling the devil and demons, and that Saint Michael had won. So I was just wondering whether that was accurate.
Yes, actually it is. The word that the demon kept saying that Robbie would not say was Dominus, which was God in Latin. And that was the word that he wouldn't say, but it was not the demon's name. When Robbie said that he had this dream when he woke up, he had seen the demon being driven away by St. Michael with a flaming sword and driven into a cave with the word spite carved over the door, which was the demon's name. And that's if that's the story he told Father Bishop, and you believe it, don't believe it, whatever, but that's the story that he told, and that's what ended the exorcism. And everybody was celebrating when Robbie woke up, at midnight, and was normal, seemed to be himself, because after all this time, at night, things were completely going crazy, and he was doing all kinds of things, talking in different voices and things. Well, now he seemed normal. Everyone celebrated but Father Bowdern, because he had been waiting and praying and asking for a sign that it was actually over, and that wasn't, for him, that wasn't a sign. But then just a few moments later, there was what sounded like an explosion in the building. Someone thought that the furnace had blown up in the hospital. And it turned out they could never find a source for the sound, the explosive sound. But to Father Bowdern, that was the sign he'd been waiting for. And to him, that was when he knew that the exorcism was finally over. And really, I mean, at least as far as, okay, let's just say that, while even though, according to a psychiatrist that I'd interviewed, he couldn't come up with any one diagnosis that would explain all the things that Robbie was doing. But let's just say that he was, young adult onset schizophrenia or whatever. Let's just say he was, he was some kind of mental disturbance that was causing him to act this way. Whatever it was, it stopped. It never happened again. None of these things ever happened again. No more trances, no more crazy behavior, no more, seizures, no more anything. That was the end.
How would you explain the levitation?
Well, you couldn't. I know. That's what I'm saying. You couldn't. But let's just say that you're someone who can explain away all those things. Well, once you get to that point and then they stop, how do we explain that? Okay, let's take it a step further and say that, okay, it was some sort of mental illness, but the exorcism cured it because Robbie believed that it cured it. Didn't it do the same thing? I mean, isn't it just as good? It's just as good, whether it was real or not real. It did what it was supposed to do. So it was over, and that's what matters.
Well, yeah, it all depends on how you how one would take the medicine, for instance.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have just about a minute left. How do you think this case, the book, the movie, how do you think that affected how we look at demons, the devil, and exorcisms, not necessarily just in this country, but around the world?
Well, I think it began a cottage industry in books, movies, and exorcisms, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there are an awful lot of people to this day because, as we all know, every time you turn on the TV, every paranormal show, as we talked about earlier, wants to tell you there are demons everywhere.
Yes.
And, I think we can trace all that back to the popularity of The Exorcist. That's what kicked it off. That's what's been, really a driving force behind that stuff. There are thousands and thousands of exorcisms done around the world every year. Do I really think all those people are possessed? Absolutely not. But a lot of them truly believe they are. So I don't know, man. But yeah, I can tell you that this whole thing really spawned an industry that didn't exist before 1949.
And now that they have a remake of the Exorcist movie coming out, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, I think it's going to be a sequel.
Yeah.
That's the good news.
Yeah.
Please don't remake the original. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. I mean, there were so many things that I never knew about this case. And yeah, I'm going to be going out and getting your book like immediately. So, but yeah, no, thank you so much. This was, incredible.
No,
just incredible.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Well, I'd like to have you back on to maybe we could just pick your brain on some more stuff.
Sure.
Absolutely.
We'll do that.
Awesome. I promise I'll keep the jokes to a minimum.
I'll put a muzzle on it.
That's okay. As long as you let me do the lead-ins to the commercial breaks, I'm happy. So,
absolutely.
We're going to have
you are hired. All right. So anyway, next week we will be joined, hopefully, by Shannon LeGros. She has been scheduled twice, and we have had technical difficulties both times, and we've had to put her off. But hopefully, we will be able to have her next week for a discussion of cryptids and all sorts of different creatures, including, we hope, an in-depth with Troy's favorite, Bigfoot himself.
The blood man.
Yep. So until next week, everybody, please be safe, be happy, and we hope you tune in next week. Thank you so much for listening.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.